Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jessica, and today I'll be presenting the article Beyond the 510K, the Regulation of Novel Moderate Risk Medical Devices, Intellectual Property Considerations, and Innovation Incentives in the FDA's De Novo Pathway. So this article was published on the NPJ Digital Medicine in February 2024. And the authors are Matteo Aboy, Christina Crespo, and Ariel Stern. This is the table of contents for the presentation today. I'll start with a brief background information and introduction, and then I'll dive into the key findings, discussions, and case study in this article. So this should be a familiar graph for many people here, but this graph shows how medical devices are regulated in the US. Devices are classified into one of the three classes based on risks, and class 1 being the lowest risk and class 3 being the highest risk. There are more regulatory controls for higher risk devices, and different devices in different classes have to go through different regulatory pathways to be on the market. And for the introduction of this article, basically pathways of commercializing new medical devices in the US has long been dominated by the 510K clearance pathway. Of the over 155K devices approved or cleared by the FDA since 1976, which is the year that 510K pathway was enacted. Around 99% of those approvals/clearances use the 510K pathway. So the pathway allows manufacturers or sponsors to gain clearance by demonstrating that the new device that they're putting into market is substantially equivalent to an existing predicate device, which means that it is as safe and effective as a legally marketed device. And while this pathway has speed up the needed time to get new devices into market, it also raises concerns when predicates are outdated or lack sufficient clinical evidence. Also, before De Novo was created, applicants or sponsors are more cautious to introduce significant innovations into their moderate risk devices, because if their 510K submissions are deemed not substantially equivalent by the FDA, then they have to go through the PMA process, which is the hardest pathway. And the De Novo classification process was established in 1997 to provide an alternative regulatory pathway for novel but moderate risk medical devices that doesn't have a suitable predicate. This pathway prevents them from being automatically classified as highest risk class 3 and subject to PMA process. So through De Novo, a device is classified as class 1 or class 2 based on their risks, and a new regulatory category is created. The device that received the De Novo classification can serve as a predicate for future 510K submissions. And this article basically explores the De Novo pathway as an alternative to the 510K clearance process and the implication of it for medical device regulation. So some key findings from the article. The first thing they look into is how frequent De Novo has been used. During the period of enacting De Novo, which is 1997 to 2023. So during this period, De Novo only accounted for 0.89% of the number of 510K clearances, and that number is close to 3,000. Then there's a spike in 2013 because in 2012, the FDAC gave FDA the authority to review direct de novo requests. Before this, applicants cannot request a de novo directly. They can only do that when their 510K submissions are deemed not substantially equivalent. So they have to go through the 510K process. If that process failed, then they can request a de novo before 2012. And in 2017, FDA published the de novo guidance. And since then, there have been 20 to 40 requests each year. The majority of de novo requests since 2017 are direct requests, meaning that companies are actively choosing this pathway rather than using it as a fallback after their 510K didn't work. And on average, the de novo review times are 338 days, comparing to 150 days for 510K and 399 days for PMA. So it's a little bit shorter than PMA, but it's still 2 times the review time of 510K. And from this figure, we can see that the review times for de novo actually vary quite substantially. The review time have huge differences across different product types. And some examples of extremely short review times are the Apple Watch ECG app, which I'll be talking about in the case study. It only takes 28 days for it to get the classification, and its irregular rhythm notification feature only takes 33 days. More than half of the de novo classifications are for hardware devices, and then the rest is split between software as medical device, meaning that the software alone is device, and it doesn't have like a hardware component with it, and IVDs. So software is an important differentiator in many hardware-based medical devices. Roughly half of them mention a software component, as well as some of the IVDs. And de novo has now become the preferred pathway for novel IVDs with no existing suitable predicate devices. And in terms of medical specialty area, the more than half of the de novo requests are clustered into the 5 primary areas, including the microbiology, neurology, general and plastic surgery, and gastroenterology/urology. In contrast, less than 2% of the requests have been in the area of dental, molecular genetics, physical medicine, and hematology. So why is de novo important? The article argues that de novo could help modernize medical device regulation in several ways. It allows the FDA to establish new product categories or regulatory categories, setting updated safety and performance standards. And it encourages companies to develop some cutting-edge technologies rather than modifying old devices to fit into the 510K criteria. And by shifting to de novo, regulators can create safer frameworks for AI-driven and software-based medical devices. Over time, increased use of de novo can help reduce the reliance on outdated predicates and making device approvals or clearances less precedent-based. And one of the major issue with the de novo process is its impact on competition and intellectual property. So when a device is classified through de novo, it establishes a new regulatory category. And this means that future competitors can enter the market more easily via 510K clearance using the de novo that received the product that received the de novo classification as a predicate. So the first company have to go through the de novo, and they bear the high costs of the development, but they don't receive any marketing exclusivity, which may discourage companies from choosing this pathway. but companies can shape the special controls required for future products, which can create some barriers for their competitors. One of the way to do that is they can tie the required performance standards to a patent key technology. And in the article, it mentioned that FDA should be mindful that the specific controls proposed by applicants are necessary. They have to be mindful for that, that the controls are necessary for demonstrating safety and effectiveness rather than being an attempt to achieve competitive advantage. And there are actually companies that do that with their products already, and FDA has issued a draft guidance, the recommendations for the use of clinical data in pre-market notifications, 510K submissions. They kind of address this issue in this draft guidance. Sorry, so I'll dive into the case study. I feel like this is a great example of seeing the de novo pathway, seeing the de novo pathway in action. So in 2018, the Apple's ECG feature on the Apple Watch was approved or classified via de novo because there was no predicate for a wearable over-the-counter ECG technology. And this sets a new regulatory category, which is the regulation number 870.2345, and a new product code, QDA, for electrocardiograph software for over-the-counter use. And it allows future competitors like Samsung, which is the case in this screenshot, and Fitbit to gain 510K clearance more easily using the Apple product as a predicate. And this case demonstrates the interaction of de novo with the 510K clearance pathway, and that novel OTC digital health products will likely have to require for de novo classification because the majority of the classical 510K predicates are prescription only. And so you may think that Apple had no advantage because they don't have marketing exclusivity for their ECG app. But actually, just as mentioned in the previous slides, the first de novo device, the first device in the category to receive a de novo classification can shape the special controls for this device. And Apple did conduct a clinical study for the ECG app. So under the new regulation, the 21 CFR 870.2345, under this new regulation, this type of product are requested to have clinical performance testing as special controls. So this might be a barrier for the competitors because clinical testing, clinical studies are pretty expensive and takes more time than non-clinical testings. So what does the future look like for de novo? Like if everyone gets familiar with it, will the request just skyrocket indefinitely? Not likely, because once a new device category is created through de novo, the follow-on devices typically still use the 510K process because 510K process still, like the review time is still easier to go through the 510K process. So the number of de novo requests might stabilize in the future. And future trends will depend on FDA policy changes, especially the shifts in how they decide or they determine what is substantial equivalence. And the FDA may encourage de novo requests to modernize the medical device categories, integrate the state-of-art technology while ensuring safety and effectiveness. Some strengths and limitations of this study. The strength, so it provides a really comprehensive regulatory analysis, and it offers pretty novel insights into how de novo fosters innovation and how it interacts with the 510K clearance pathway. This topic is highly relevant to AI and software-based devices, which is a area of rapid growth in the healthcare industry. And it also suggests some policy recommendations that can inform future regulatory reforms. The limitations, the sample size is small comparing to other pathways, as de novo classifications still make up just a fraction of the FDA's clearances or approvals. There's not much long-term outcome data on de novo approved devices, so the post-market performance is not as clear. Comparing to other pathways, de novo classification are still pretty new, in my opinion. I mean, it just came out in 1997, and the guideline came out in 2017. So I feel like it's still pretty new, and it needs some time to really see what this pathway's long-term effect is and what the potential of this pathway have. So conclusion, the 510K process is widely used, but has significant limitations, especially for the innovative technologies. And this article highlights de novo's potential to modernize regulatory standards and encourage innovation in medical devices. And thank you for your time.